The 2024 Union Budget, which is also called the vote on account, is going to be the last budget before India's Lok Sabha elections. It is going to be an interim budget, and a significant impact might happen on the people who decide to cast their vote. Now, talking about the pledge that the Prime Minister of our country has taken of Viksit Bharat, will this be reflective in the budget? Is the budget going to be populist in wake of garnering more number of people to vote for the country's current dispensation? And how is it then going to impact the political landscape come the 2024 Lok Sabha election? I want to start my conversation with Tehseen Poonawalla. Tehseen, good to have you on the telecast, and your views particularly regarding the Finance Ministry review that was released a couple of days ago, talking about how India is set to grow at a 7% GDP. India is set to become a $7 trillion economy by 2030 and the third largest economy of the world by 2030 as well. Now, in these big aspirations and the probability of them getting completed by the end of 2030 being very likely, not just because of the domestic prospects that we see, but also the international agencies, those who are monitoring India and its economy also speak about. In a situation such as this, what do you think is going to be the 2024 budget? Who all is it going to entail? And is this then going to have a heavy impact on the elections that take place thereafter?
So thank you so much for having me on the show. Let me break this up into different segments. First, that India would be a $7 trillion economy by 2030 and the third largest economy in the world. Let's all wish the best for India, because whatever side of the political divide we are, we want India to grow, India to be prosperous. It's our homeland. But is it enough for India to be the third largest economy in the world and a $7 trillion economy? Or is it more important that our per capita income grows, which is 143rd in the world right now? And as much as our per capita income grew during the UPA years, that hasn't grown during the NDA years, which shows that money is being concentrated in the hands of the few. That is not fair for a country like India. In India, everyone must have equal opportunities. So I think that is something that we need to address. Will the Indian economy grow? Of course it's going to grow. We're a population of 1.5 billion. We're going to hit about 1.6 billion. So of course your economy is going to grow. All goods and services are transacted.
Do you take it for granted that because India has a population of 140 crore people, therefore it is but obvious that our GDP is going to grow at 7%?
No, I don't take it for, no, I don't. I'm coming to the 7%. I don't take it for granted. Because if they do something as ridiculous, as criminal as demonetization, which was a criminal act, got away by courts, it should have been punished at least in a civil court, then we will not grow. So as long as the government doesn't do anything, we will grow. The problem is if the government does something, because this is a government that does not understand macroeconomics. Sure, it understands microeconomics. It does not understand macroeconomics, which comes to the second question. Will we grow at 7%? Sure, we will grow at 7%. But again, what are the factors and what is the 7% growth? Before we come to that, is our 7% growth that we are talking about going to be consistent over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years? That will help us lead to this number of $7 trillion. That is the key factor. We've also had a period where our economy is contracted for the first time in 45 years. Now, when you grow from a low base high and you have an 8% growth because you've already contracted, that's easy to achieve. Can you consistently keep that 7% growth? That is the key factor. Now to the third factor.
Keeping in mind, in comparison to the rest of the world, which has been struggling to grow, there have been growth rates to even as less as 3%, 4% in the West. You take a look at our neighbor China, which has also been struggling since COVID and even before that. And India being the one amongst the largest economies, the fastest growing economies of the world. That has to say, and there has been consistency. If we take a look at the past years and the hiccup that came in the face of COVID, that was overcome at the fastest rate by India. So what is that reflective of?
May I humbly answer that?
Yeah.
We've had many quarters prior to COVID and after COVID where we've seen our growth actually reduce, not grow. So when you go from a lower base and then you say now we are growing, of course you're going to grow because the economy contracted for the first time in 45 years.
Okay.
You
Okay.
had
Okay.
demonetization,
All
and
right.
prior
Fair
to
enough. Yeah.
just 1 second. Prior to demonetization, your growth rate fell down. So let's understand that there are two more areas that
You need to
actually
understand
worry
the
me
prior. Okay. Fair enough.
very,
Okay.
very
Go ahead.
firmly.
Yeah.
There are two areas that worry me very, very strongly. One is we are hitting the 100% debt to GDP ratio. IMF has warned us about it. Two, the lack of jobs that we are creating. And this is something that is terrible. For an economy that's growing, if you're not creating jobs, for a single engineer's job in an IT company owned by a friend of mine, about a few kilometers away from my house, there were 20,000 people standing in a line. 100,000 people are ready to leave India and go to Israel and face war because they'd rather die there with a job than without a job. The most number of Indians have given up their passport in the past decade. These are HNIs. The most number of HNIs have moved out of India. What worries me is anybody above rupees 75 to 80 crores is buying another house in Dubai or Singapore, and they will not tell you this on NewsX or on a news channel, but they will tell you off the record, we better have our
Okay,
foot
fair
in
enough.
another
You're
country.
giving me
This
those
is very,
examples,
very,
Tessie.
very
I
scary.
would rather be happy, and if we were to get those statistics out and the figures out, and that would make for a better concrete,
Which is what I gave you.
concrete
I gave you
argument over that.
statistics
But
and
okay,
figures.
okay, fair enough. You've
Thank
made your
you.
point. I'm going to quickly get in Deshatha Nigam also into the conversation. And Deshatha Nigam, with regards to what Tehseen has said and about the growth rate of our country and about the $7 trillion economy mark that we are going to reach by 2020, 2027, 2030. In a situation such as this, the question I ask is whether the government of India is then looking forward to putting out a populist budget, as has been tradition for the past governments. Right before the election year, there is this sentiment that there is going to be a populist budget that is going to be unveiled.
Well, as we know, Megha, that this is an election year and therefore an interim budget. The regular budget will come when the new government comes into the picture in May. And therefore, what we see today is a budget which will balance the schemes of the government of India, which will be to give progress and impetus to the various schemes which are there. Probably more amount will be allocated there because they are trying to, there is a movement going on at the ground level, which is trying to increase the base and to make the people aware to join these schemes, which the BJP has undertaken. And more people will be joined. A lot of people are not even aware, and therefore they have to increase the allocation of all those social welfare schemes. Secondly, let me tell you, government will be probably able to meet its target of fiscal deficit. It will be down to 5.9%. From 9.2% in 2021. And the markets are quite buoyant of the fact that the nominal GDP is seen growing at 8.9% this year, but this will go to 10 to 11.5%. But the ministry says 10.5% on the conservative side, but the markets are saying it will grow between 10 to 11.5%. And the focus on the government has been to increase the capital expenditure, so that which gives a ripple effect to increase the employment, to stock market reflects that, and also the ripple effect goes to the level of the business and also to the farmers and everybody. So infrastructure push will be there. And let me tell you, people talk of deficit. People forget that the external deficit ratio is much less as compared to the previous Congress government. The internal deficit, which is because of the capex expenditure internally, money generated and borrowed internally, which gives return, maximum return because of the infrastructure where the money goes. A lot of returns takes place out there, and that is repaid by the people by saving fuels, by increasing the business activity, industrial activities, all this, and therefore you have to make a distinction between the external debt and the internal debt. That probably Tehseen clearly, brushed it under the carpet. He just said everything, in a big brushing manner. Let me also point out that the basic areas which will be there, probably middle class, farmers, women, and industry, and an environment which is already there of getting foreign investment in India has to be further increased through regulatory certainty, so that the Chinese business which is moving out, the international business which is moving out, must come to India. It is slowly coming, there is no doubt about it, but the speed has to be increased. And that probably will take place because an environment has been created. The only shining hope in the world, the World Bank, they have revised their, India's GDP growth now by 0.2% recently. The world is saying, but some of the politicians, doomsday politicians in India or analysts in India, they don't see that what World Bank says, what IMF says, why the United Nations says, but then they have their own, I don't know. I don't know what to call it.
Okay, maybe. All right. Quick. Okay, I'm going to come to Joyita now. And Joyita, as Tehseen was saying, the per capita income is really poor for a large country like India, which is also the 5th largest economy of the world. I would also like to mention in the last 10 years, the budget allocation for a number of these schemes, whether we talk about Jan Dhan, we talk about PM Kisan Samman Yojana, we talk about Ujjwala Yojana, Awas Yojana. I think these are some of the schemes that have gotten the larger chunk of the budget in the past several years. Has there been a concerted effort by the government of India to reach to the poorest of the poor by providing them the benefits, and how successful has the government been in being able to touch the lives of these beneficiaries and their families?
Well, Megha, when we are talking about GDP, I think a fairer comparison would be in terms of PPP, because when we are looking at, GDP, I think is 2,500 or something like that, which has more than doubled in the last 10 years. What India was, I think, 10 years back, it has more than doubled. So there is no doubt that it is an achievement to a large extent. But yes, development, when we are looking at the states, there are states that are still lagging behind. There are states that are far way ahead. And you see, this is the problem when you see uneven development. Until and unless development evens out. Okay, and there are many states, but at the same time that are not having that level of development, but at the same time, when we are looking at, say, for example, the Bimaru states, what used to be the Bimaru states, many of them are gradually coming out of that Bimaru, that Bimaru status. So that itself is an achievement. And when we are looking at, say, for example, when you are talking about the scheme specifically, when you look at the multidimensional poverty index, and it is not just the Niti Aayog poverty index that we are going to talk about, that has come out in 2023, and there is another version that has come out, I think 2024 earlier in the month. And when you are going to compare it with the international report on multidimensional poverty which has been kind of brought out with the United Nations, you see, I think around over 400 million Indians have come out of the poverty, have been lifted out of poverty. Okay, and that's a huge number. And when you are even looking at the, this indices, multidimensional poverty index. Now, what this index is very interesting because, in the multidimensional poverty sector, it has to meet the SDG goals, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations by 2030. When you are, and so these are all aligned. So when you are looking at those areas, it looks like certain schemes are working wonders on the ground.
Yeah.
Like this, say for example, in terms of economy, the Jan Dhan Yojana, along with that, say, Mudra loan, so that one, Ujjwala to an extent, to a large extent, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So it is not that the government schemes are not working. These targeted schemes are working. And when you are looking at poverty alleviation, it is not just about, how much, it's a holistic thing, whether they have houses, whether they have toilets, they have access to clean water, electricity. So automatically,
and then this boils down to per capita income of an individual as well, or of particular household as well. So Tehseen, again a question to you. So when today in the budget speech that was made by the president of our country, and there were these statistics that had been provided for each of the schemes that had been launched, and the number of people, the number of lives that these schemes have touched. and there's tangible evidence to this. Does that not amount to an effort that has been put systematically year after year for the number of people and a large percentage of our country that are poor, to lift them, to put them at a level playing field, to give them the benefits and allow them to grow at the same speed as the rest of the country, and especially when it comes to giving them all the benefits, all the facilities, whether it is about health or homes, you talk about toilets, you talk about free food, you talk about mudra loans. So these have been measures that have been put in place by the government, and there is evidence to the fact that they have reached the last mile.
They haven't reached the last mile. The government has done some decent work, some terrible work, but they haven't reached the last mile. You're right, there has been the Niti Aayog report on multidimensional poverty, and the least amount of poverty exists in states that are not governed by the BJP. Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, etc. The biggest gaps are in states that are governed by the present union government. But let's leave that aside for a moment. There's been a terrible mismatch. But even if you were to leave that aside, you spoke about the Human Development Index. Amongst the progressive states, Gujarat has the worst Human Development Index, worst in the country. Most women are anemic in Gujarat. Most children are born malnourished in Gujarat. We have a serious malnourishment problem, not a hunger problem, a malnourishment problem. That's why Indians are now today facing a pandemic of heart attacks and diabetes. Indians are terribly malnourished, and 80 crore Indians are being given carbs. They're not being given proteins. And the government doesn't want to talk about it. A poor child who's malnourished, who is being given carbs, will never be able to compete with a child who is born in privilege and is being brought up on protein.
Okay. So now we are reaching a level. You're talking about specifics, and I'll say these are problems that are problems that need to be dealt by the government. You talk about feeding kids the carbohydrates versus proteins. When you take a look at the United States of America, I think the larger percentage of the population, the children, are obese simply because they are fed on a fast food diet. So each country will have problems that are peculiar to their own demographics and how their situation deals out with, how we have grown as a country, as an economy in the last 75 years of our independence. But the overall picture, what is the sentiment like? What does the world look at India as, and particularly the budget? And I wanted to touch upon the political aspect of it as well. And I'm going to bring in, I have with me Huda Zariwala. And Huda, the question I wanted to ask and get a response from you about the political impact of it all. Does this benefit the government that it has a position that it is the current dispensation and the elections are going to happen in 2024 in April? Is the interim budget that is announced tomorrow, could it have a massive impact on the voters?
Good evening. Yes, absolutely. With the elections in the fore, I mean, this interim budget is presented, before the actual budget is in session. This is because the elections are, ahead. And also at this point in time, the government is going to try and bank on, focusing on issues and topics which do not touch upon the lives of, the poor, the people who are actually in need of the budget allocated in their favor. I mean, at this point, I could say the optimism does score over the sting of inflation. This budget should actually talk about how each household, the last mile, is affected. But then clearly, these are not the issues that will be discussed in the main budget, as we have seen in the past, previous budgets. Or this interim budget also does not talk much about, issues that will affect the way voters.
Mind you, the budget has not been announced as yet. So we just at this point in time
agreed. The interim budget.
And if you're saying what if the budget was not populist?
I mean, let us not forget that this budget is not going to touch upon, topics for, issues for the common people. We're talking about, I mean, there is clearly a recession, a global recession going on at this point. But then again, if you talk about in the context of India, the recession does not hit as hard as it does in the US market. And like one of the previous panelists earlier mentioned, that India does have an
recession is
advantage
not
over
hit
China.
India at all.
I'm not saying that, but not as hard as it has hit the US markets, as it has hit, post the Russian war, the Middle Eastern market. So let us not forget that we can take advantage of a position, because we are globally placed in a manner where we could, obviously we have an advantage over China, and at this point, even advantage over US markets, because even the US at this point is undergoing a massive recession. But then
So
again,
has the government been able to utilize this pivot in building India into an economy that the world is looking at?
India has been able to definitely create a large, global presence in terms of the, great prime minister, having his face on practically everything and anything that should, make a difference, right? From, anything happens, you just see him out there. But then has he really touched upon issues? Has he really spoken about everything that is going wrong in the country? Has he, created enough jobs for the people? Has he done anything for the inflation, the massive inflation that's going on? Has he done enough for women empowerment and security of our, women out there? I mean, issues that actually matter. Has he spoken about, basic issues like Bijli Pani?
I'm just going to list down for you the list of schemes where multi-crore rupees, in fact, some of them lakhs of crores of rupees that have been allocated.
Actually reached the people. I can also list down a number of schemes, a number of corruption schemes.
As per the government records today, if you heard the speech of the president of our country in the parliament, there were statistics, figures that have been provided talking about the funds that have been allocated versus the beneficiaries to whom these funds and whom these schemes and yojanas have reached to. And if we build a comparison to the number of people in our country, 140 crore people in our country, and the percentage of the people of our country who need to be given, who are the beneficiaries, who have to be benefited from these schemes versus the number of people and families and households that have been touched by these schemes, there can be then a clarity drawn on whether these schemes have worked, whether these yojanas have worked. And we have done this math, this arithmetic, and we've been able to see that this has in fact reached the last mile. This has in fact impacted the lives of the people who are in dire need of these facilities, these houses, these toilets, the water, the jobs, the business loans, and so on and so forth. So we cannot just completely disregard the fact that the government has launched these schemes, and the government has been able to translate these schemes into real-time success on the ground. Joyita, quickly coming to you now. Quick comment from you before I wrap this up. And now again, so can this be called advantage BJP? Because it is BJP government in power, it can do anything at this point of time in the budget. And if suppose it were to, I don't know, give more impetus, more funds, allocate more funds to the PM Kisan scheme or the Jan Dhan Yojana or the Prime Minister Anna Yojana, and there could be a plethora of these schemes, and the government could cherry pick them and decide, we are going to put more funds into these schemes, and this will help us be more popular amongst the vote bank, and that will work well for us in winning the 2024 election. Is this then, wouldn't it be advantageous for the BJP and work against the opposition parties?
Megha, I think right now the BJP is at pole position when it comes to 2024 elections, and I think that is the reason why it can afford not to be populist, and I hope it stays that way. The perception is that they are coming back to power. So, if that is the case, they can afford not to be populist, and I hope that is how it happens, because you see, this is, I mean, when you are talking about, and when you are looking at Modi government's track record in terms of the schemes that it has kind of started, you have to understand it in terms of what is welfare and what is reverie, you know, freebies. So, I think it has been able to draw a fine line between the two, where the state should not go overboard with freebies, so that, you know, in a manner that it starts impacting your fiscal plan. So, I think they will continue on that track, because that is what it seems that their principle has been.
Okay.
But, and I don't see it being as populist and major announcements coming in this is actually a vote of account anyway. So, the major announcements and all, they have happened. The major announcements came in the last budget and the one before that. You see, so I think this is going to be just a continuation, carrying forward of what they have already done.
Okay, quickly then, Deshadar Nigam, now if you take a look at government's report card and the funds that have been infused into a number of these schemes for the welfare, for the development of our countrymen, of the poor, of the underprivileged who need to be benefited, and there has been a policy that has been followed by the government of India. Can something similar be reflected by the regional parties who are ruling states, whether it is West Bengal or Tamil Nadu or Delhi, who could then put out the development model which is going to be in direct contest to what the government of India has done on the larger scale or at the national level? And could the Arvind Kejriwal model or the Mamata Banerjee model or the DMK model then suffice for the public to decide, or perhaps even lean towards India Alliance or all these regional parties as a viable alternative option to the BJP?
Well, Megha, let me tell you, those who say that benefits are not reaching the people, the last mile connectivity is not there, they're forgetting that connectivity is through direct benefit transfers, digital transfers. So there is no question of corruption coming into between. These are people who have burrowed their, head under the ground and do not want to look at the reality. Nobody can tinker with those direct benefit transfers, and most of the schemes are going that, linking it with Aadhaar. So nobody, when the ration is given, it is Aadhaar linked, fingerprints are taken, and then you get it. So no false people are getting it. So I think people have run away from reality, and that is what opposition is doing. I don't see there is any Arvind Kejriwal model or Mamata Banerjee model. I have seen what kind of developments that they have. Arvind Kejriwal is lucky that half of Delhi is governed through central schemes, and the NDMC governs New Delhi. And what we have seen is bad roads. One rain and you see the entire Delhi is flooded. You don't work on drains, and we don't need that model. And the corruption that we have seen, the ministers inside jail, and hundreds of crores being recovered by ED in West Bengal. I had never seen such amount of cash on the visuals on video. So we don't
let us
need
not
that
forget
model.
none of those charges are
Please
yet
don't
proven.
Don't interrupt.
Let us not forget
Don't
none of those
interrupt.
charges
I don't interrupt.
none of those
Please
charges
don't
are proven.
interrupt.
I will
Please
not
don't
have you
interrupt.
defame
You will
Aam
get
Aadmi
your
Party
chance.
without any due
You get
cause.
your chance. You will get your
The
chance.
day you talk on facts
Megha,
is the
please
day we can
control the debate.
actually
Please
hold this
control the
debate
debate.
honorably.
Please control
Sir,
the debate.
do
Please
not
control the debate.
forget none of those charges are proven. We know at the behest of whom
know.
the ED,
We know who
the
you are.
CBI is
Huda,
working.
I'll
Let
come
us
back to
not
you.
forget these.
I have very little time. Deshadar Nigam, quickly 30 seconds before I come to Huda. Yes.
You know who's courteous, who's not courteous on this TV debates, and I never interfere anybody. Anyway, the fact is, it's all there for people to see. And the model that we are talking about, you throw out Tatas from West Bengal, they go to Gujarat. You don't want development out there. You are only hell-bent on minority appeasement. That is a development India does not need. That cannot be an alternative model to what government of India is doing. Therefore, we have to be very clear what model that we need to choose, the direct benefits that are going to the people. And that is where BJP has an advantage. It is far ahead. There is no Indic alliance.
Okay.
What we have seen today in Punjab or for example, West Bengal or Delhi, or for that matter, we'll see in Kerala also. So let's not talk about that fictional.
All right, you made your point. Quickly, Uda, 30 seconds before I wrap this up. Yeah. So the situation, BJP versus India alliance, and particularly not the India alliance of a cumulative India alliance, but the regions that have successfully been having alternative governments, whether it is West Bengal or we talk about Tamil Nadu, or we at this point of time talk about Delhi. Can their models be used as an example to lure voters to vote for India alliance against BJP?
Absolutely, because we have seen in Delhi, the budget is the only budget which is in excess. It is the only city. It is literally the only place in amongst all the, governments ruled, from the other states, which has a budget in excess. So Delhi has spoken about, issues that matter to the people. Delhi has spoken about issues like electricity, bijli, pani, and all of that. When was the last time we heard BJP do any of that? I do not remember. Not in the recent few years, not in the 10 years that the BJP has been in power. You see the corruption level in all the BJP ruled states. You see, the recent example of Mobi Bridge and everything that's happening in Gujarat, in all the other states, Karnataka before Congress took over.
Let's not malign any political party. Let's also talk about statistics. Let's figure out the numbers. Let's figure out put out the figures, and that will give us a parity, a clear vision of which party stands where, which government stands where, and then hold a discussion that is going to be cogent, that is also going to be based on credible facts and figures. On that note, I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast. This year is going to be interesting. It's a highly dynamic year. 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and therefore extremely important. It is going to be closely watched, the 2024 budget, and whether the government of India is going to this time succumb to the populism that it is being expected to do ahead of the elections, or is it going to stick its ground and talk about development and welfare and allocate the funds to the places, to the areas, to the people, to the schemes that require it the most.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.